Welcome back to our whole number operation. So in this part, we're going to look at adding and subtracting fractions. So when it comes to addition and subtraction of fractions, these fractions would have to have the same denominator in order for you to easily subtract or add them. So in this instance, if you were to have, for example, 2 over 4 plus 3 over 4 for that instance, you would just add the numerators and then the denominator will remain the same. So this would just be 5 over 4. But in other words, now if you have an example where the denominators are not the same, so for example 2 over 9 plus 5 over 12. So you see now you have a problem where these denominators are different, and in order for us to add or subtract fractions, so this works for addition and subtraction, we need to find the lowest common denominator. So in this instance here, we would need to find our lowest common denominator, our LCD. So what number can fit into both 9 and 12? So the lowest common multiple between them, and that would be 36. So we times this by 4, times this by 4 to get to 36, times this by 3, times this by 3. And then we should have 8 over 36 plus 15 over 36. And now since the denominators, so once we rewrote them having the same denominator, having the same lowest common denominator, now we can add or subtract our fractions and simplify the answer if necessary. So we would get 23 over 36, and well, this is already in its simplest form. So that's addition and subtraction. So now multiplication and division on the other end. So let's talk about multiplication of fractions. So this one is relatively straightforward. So this is, you would multiply the numerator times the numerator and denominator times the denominator first. So for example here, if you have 3 over 5 times 10 over 11, this one is just straightforward. It's just 3 times 10 at the top and 5 times 11 at the bottom, and then you would essentially get 30 over 55. And then to get this in its simplest form, we can just divide the top by 5, divide the bottom by 5, and we would get 6 over 11. So that's a nice, quick, easy way when it comes to multiplication of fractions. Division of fractions, come to that now. So very similar, but just one step before that. So division of fractions. And if you look at an example here, let's say for example 3 over 4 divided by 5 over 7, and here this would be 3 over 4 times. So when you divide in any two fractions, you need to convert that division sign into a multiplication sign, and how you do that, you need to invert it and multiply. So 3 over 4 multiplication, and you would swap the numerator and the denominator. So these two will be swapped around, so invert it and multiply, and therefore you treat it as normal. So 3 times 7, 21 all over 20. So that's your normal multiplication. So it's just a pre-step there to convert that division sign into a multiplication sign by inverting and multiplying. So this is your operations in terms of fractions. And now moving on to your decimal fractions. So we've done fractions with the numerator, denominator, we've done improper fractions, we've done mixed fractions as well. So let's have a look at our decimal fractions. So decimal fractions. So in this part, we just need to have an understanding, like if you see a specific, so you have to understand decimals in terms of maybe which decimal is bigger than the other, different places or different parts of that specific number. So for example 536.247, like you need to understand what is what the comma, or what the digits after the comma, what does it represent in which specific one. So for example, if I were to circle that number 3, what is that, what does that 3 represent? So if you were to put this in some sort of like expanded notation form, this would be 500 plus 30. So as you can see here, the 3 is the tens column, so that is the 30. It represents 30 plus 6 plus 0.2 or 2 over 10 plus 0.04 plus 0.007. So this is that expanded notation where you need to understand that value and what does that specific decimal mean. So along with that, understanding which decimal is bigger. So for example, if you look at a quick example here, which one is bigger? So 0.1 or 0.01. So in this instance here, well, we need to understand here that, well, 0.1 is going to be greater than 0.01, and then likewise, so here 0.1 is greater than 0.01, and then also 0.01 is greater than 0.001. So as you add more zeros after the comma, the smaller the actual value is. Another thing in terms of decimals, you would also need to understand how to round off your decimal. So whether it's to the nearest whole number, nearest 10, nearest 100. So here, if we just have a look at a quick example, rounding decimals. So here, for example, if you look at 23.46, and if the question was to round off to the nearest tenth, alright, so tenth now, not tens, so nearest tenth, that would illustrate that if this is the tens, that's the units, that is the first one is the tenth, alright, so this is let's label this better. So this one is tens, this one is units, this is tenths, this one is hundredths. Alright, so rounding off here, let's say round this off to nearest tenths. So what you would do is you would look at the number next to the tenth, so that would be the hundredths now. So we would look at this number here, and since that number is greater than 5, our answer would be 23.50. And if you were to ask this to round off to the nearest whole number, well, then again, we would just look at 23.5. We look at the tens part, because we look at the unit. The unit needs to change whether or remain the same in that matter. So then this would actually, so here if you were to say round off to nearest whole number, then we would have a look at the decimal. So this is also 5 and above. So then that would give us 24 for that specific part. All right, and then also you round off to nearest tens, then you look at units. So it's always the one to the right. So that is the trick here. For rounding off to decimals, look at first digit to the right. Right, perfect. And then another thing, you would also get or know how to understand how to convert decimals. All right, so if you have a look at converting decimals, that is, you have 0.62, for example, then you would need to know that, okay, that this is equal to 6 over 10 plus 2 over 100. So now you're looking at the tenths and the actual digit and where it actually represents. And then again, you would have to use your LCD here, because this is technically addition of fractions here. So this is times by 10 times by 10 for your LCD of 100. So you would get 60 plus 2 all over 100, which is 62 over 100, or otherwise simplified, divide that by 2, divide that by 2, you get 31 over 50. All right. And then apart from that, also addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division of decimals as well, right? So we'll have a look at a quick example of each of these. So here, let's just do addition here, and this is called this decimals, and let's look at multiplication here. So when it comes to addition, so here, if we take say 26.473 plus 18.25, essentially we'd have to do it like how we did our kind of long addition when we had those large numbers manually. So something similar to that, where all the values before the comma on one side, so 26, let's just put the comma here, 473, and this would be 18.250. Right. So now again, let's just add going downwards. So start from the extreme right. So that would be 3. This would be 12, carry the 1. So 4 plus 2, that's 6, that's 7. And nothing carry over, so comma. 6 plus 8 is 14, carry the 1. And then you end up with 44.723. So the carrying over works very similar as we did with the whole numbers. And then if we subtracting, then we would also borrow as we did before with the whole numbers. And in terms of the multiplication, you would have a look. So let's have a look at an example here. Let's say 0.02 times 7.4. So in this instance here, when we multiply each decimal, right, so we would first need to get rid of the power. So this is like, let's say, more or less a shortcut. So firstly, we would need to get rid of this comma here and this comma here. So firstly, we times this by 100 and we times this by 10. And once we multiply those two, then we would go ahead and divide by 100 and divide by 10 as well to get our answer. So this would be 2 times 74, and that is equals to 148. And then now again, remember, since we multiplied by 100 and times by 10, what we would do is we would divide by 100 and divide by 10. So essentially divide by 1,000. All right, so that would give us 0.148. So that is essentially a shortcut when you are, or well, manually at least, multiplying decimals together. So get rid of that comma, however, whichever one it is, and then once you get rid of that, multiply it and then divide it by that same 10 or 100 that you did initially. Okay, so let's just have a look at some division here. Let's just incorporate some subtraction here just to show the example, and we'll do division as well. That's 2 examples of this part of the lesson. So subtraction, if we have, for example, 15.03 minus 2.751. So again, let's put all the whole numbers, all decimals together. So 15.030 minus 2.751. So again, 0 count minus 1, so we'd have to borrow now in this instance. So borrow 1 there, that would be 10 minus 1, 9, 2 count, so take 1 4 from there, 10, and then that becomes 9. And thereafter we get that to be 12, and then that's 7, 2, and then 2, and then 1. So we end up with very similar with the same borrowing technique and then carrying over like how we did with addition. So this is where we had borrowing and then just bringing it down by the column. So confirming what you calculate, you should get 12.279, but obviously you can't use a calculator, so just manual technique there. So then division when it comes to decimals. So for example, if we have 6.51 divided by 0.3. So firstly, the way we should approach this is, let's first write it, the division of this as like a fraction. So it would be 6.51 divided by 0.3. And then thereafter, what we do is well, very similar to the multiplication decimals, but here we need to kind of get rid of at least the bottom one. Alright, so here we times this by 10, and whatever you do to the numerator or denominator, you do it the same. So then we're left with 65.1 divided by 3, and then that there we can actually use our, so we have to multiply by the same number, right? And so it doesn't change the sum, and then thereafter we're able to actually work this out to be 21.7. Cool. So that is subtraction, division, multiplication, and addition of decimals, and I will see you in the next lesson where we will have a look at percentages.